Hello my fellow YouTubers and welcome back to the channel. Today what we're going to look at is how to use VirtualBox. So we've had a few videos where we've installed Windows into a VirtualBox and we played around with one or two different settings, but now we're actually going to get into the nuts and bolts. So when we click on new, we have the option to create a new virtual machine, and in the name, if we type in Linux, you'll notice that in the version you'll have many different versions of Linux. So if you're looking for a specific flavor, this is how you can actually do it. You can type in Linux and then you can choose the flavor you want. Also note that there's a 32 and 64-bit version of Linux for various different of these flavors as well, from Mandriva to Debian, etc. If I then type in Windows, you will then notice that in the version you will now see different versions of Windows. So this is all the way from Windows 11, and these are 64 and 32-bit version, all the way down to Windows 3.1. So if you want to install a Windows 3.1 machine, you can do it here. You'll also notice you have things like Windows 2000, Windows 2003, Windows 2008, Windows 2012, that sort of thing, Windows 22. These are your server versions of Windows. So if you need to install a Windows server, what you can do is you can create the appropriate machine where you know the drivers will function, where everything will work with that virtual machine, and then you can install server into that specific virtual machine. So that is one of the things to note there. You can also then type in things that are relative. So if I type in Windows space 11, you'll notice that version will pop up with Windows 11 64-bit. So it's smart enough to sort of realize and to sort of guess what it is you're looking for. Now this isn't absolutely perfect. If I load an ISO image, for example, what will happen is it won't always guess correctly. So there I've just loaded an ISO image and it's happy with Windows as Windows 64-bit, but it doesn't really quite understand that that is actually Windows 11. So you'll notice that that is grayed out, but it says other Windows 64-bit version. But now if I was to choose another one, so let's, for example, let's take Windows 8.1. There it's now recognized it correctly in the version as Windows 8.1. If we then go back in and I have a look at another image, so let's take the Windows 11 ISO from Flash we created, you see again version says other Windows 64-bit, so it's not quite sure. But if I take the H2, 23H2, there you'll see Windows 11 in the version, so there it shows that correctly. So with your ISOs, it depends on how you label them, but it also depends on how you downloaded them to give you the proper one. Also notice we have the skip unattended installation, which we can toggle on and off just by ticking it. We are going to just tick it to skip the unattended version and just click next. Now you notice that you have sliders and we have boxes. So for the hardware section for your RAM, you can either use your toggle buttons in order to be able to toggle up and down, or what you can do is you can actually use the slider to slide up and down as well. Now the interesting thing is you can also just overwrite these numbers and type in your own numbers. So for example, I can just click in the box, putting my insertion point in there, and then I can change it however I like. Also notice we can do the same thing with the CPUs as well, the processors. So there I have 3 CPUs, now I can toggle to 4, 3, 2, etc. I can enable or disable EFI. We'll leave that enabled and click next. Your VirtualBox, their hard drive, so there again we can use the toggle button in order to be able to toggle it up and down. So that is going to be the size of your hard drive or hard disk. But we can, again, what we can also do is we can manually input our own value as well, just like what we did with RAM, for example. And yes, that gives us the ability to then go for a dynamic disk or a full disk. We can also select a hard drive as well. So if I have an existing hard drive, I can choose one of those, and this can be useful to us if we have Windows Ready pre-installed on another drive that we're just loading. In the summary section, you can then see Windows 11. We can see basically that there is base memory of 5000. We have a hard disk of about 100 gigs, etc. So all of these various different values, they are the ones that we pre-chose. Now what's going to happen is it's not always going to work. So you notice I'm clicking finish and nothing's happening. Don't worry about that if that happens to you. All it means that it's got a setting it's not quite 100% happy with. So all you need to do is just click on the back button and adjust a few settings, and then click forward again and click finish. And if it still doesn't accept it, you can go back again, maybe to your RAM, for example, dial that down a little bit, for example, try again, and voila, there we go. Now it's gone through. Now you'll notice you've got different sections: general, system, display, storage, audio, network, USB, shared folders, and description. And I'm just going to click on settings again, and in settings you will see you've got the same sections, so general, system, display, etc. Under general, you notice you've got various different tabs you can also select. So you can encrypt your drive, for example, or just leave it as basic. You can change your machine name should you wish to. You can change your machine version if you want to as well. And then let's go to system. And in system, what you can do is you can change things like, for example, your boot order by clicking on it and then just clicking the down arrow. So that moves it down in priority. You can also remove it altogether just by unticking it, so the floppy doesn't exist right now. You can change your chipset, your TPM, your pointing devices, all of these various things as well. You'll notice on display, this is your video memory. Video memory is a pre-allocated memory just for video, and the maximum at the moment is 128 meg. I recommend you leave it on that unless you are really battling. You'll also notice you can change your type of graphics controller. We'll leave that as default and then click on storage. Now you'll notice because we inserted a ISO earlier, there's a CD in the CD-ROM drive. So this is obviously a virtual CD, but you can click on CD and then we can choose a different one. So there, for example, I've chosen a different CD. So we now have a Win11 23H2 disc, and that's ready to rock and roll. We can go to audio. Audio, there you can change various different defaults relating to your sound and sound card. So, for example, I can turn off audio completely or disable it. You see Sound Blaster 16, that is a type of sound card that you can enable, for example, and these are emulated. In networking, we then have various different options, so we can enable or disable the network card. If you disable it, it means it's not there anymore. And you'll notice that by default it's attached to NAT, or Network Address Translation. We'll get into NAT much later on. This is where we start playing around with server. And we have things like bridged adapter and various different other options. We'll also get into bridged adapter a little bit later on. Suffice to say that bridged adapter is great for things like routers, which we will get into. Routers, gateways, and firewalls. Also have internal networks not attached, cloud networks, all sorts of things there. So there are some really cool options that you can play with. Under advanced, there are additional cool options as well, because you can choose a different network card, for example. And you can even change your MAC address. So your MAC address is your hardware address that is attached to your network card. Every network card on Earth has a different MAC address, and this is a hexadecimal address that is used to identify the manufacturer of the card, as well as being a unique ID for the card. So you can change the MAC address as well. As far as port forwarding goes, we're not going to get too heavily involved in that, but when we deal with firewalls later on, we will get into port forwarding. It's a great tool in order to be able to redirect traffic for certain types of protocols, but we will get into that later. Also note that we can allow up to 4 adapters, so I can have 4 network cards in this virtual machine should I wish. Adapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we have your serial ports. Serial ports are old school, also known as COM ports or communication ports. They were used for things like mice back in the day, as well as modems. I would recommend, if you don't need one, disable it. Serial is really, really old, and a lot of that has been replaced with USB. So USB became a thing just after Y2K, and with that the serial port kind of went out of the window. Speaking of USB, we have different options. So I can click on the add USB button, which then gives me the option to add USB devices. If my USB stick was plugged in, you would actually see my USB stick here. There is a video relating to installing Windows via USB. Go check that out if you want to see more about that, on how to boot off of USB. And we've got different versions of USB, so 1, 2, and 3. Shared folders can be very, very useful. Shared folders allows us to create a folder on our host machine that is usable on our VirtualBox. So what this allows us to do is to be able to make a folder where we can put different files and folders and things like that into, And then from VirtualBox, from our virtual machine, we can then have access to that folder. So it's basically like a shared folder that we can actually create. So that's the steps on how to make one. You can choose whether it's going to be read-only or if it's going to auto-mount. We're not going to worry too much about that because we're not actually going to use one just yet, but we will at a later date. Other options associated with that as well is you can remove the folder, for example, and then we just have the user interface. Feel free to play around here, but this is just really where you get to customize your user interface a little bit more. And we are going to go back to General and then click OK. Now another useful feature is instead of going into settings, what we can actually do is we can just click on the links. So you'll notice when you go over shared folders, it goes blue. And with that, then I can see the shared folder we created earlier. If I click on General, it'll take me into General, right? So the General section under Settings. So this is just a quick way of being able to get to exactly the same place we were at when we clicked on Settings. So there's System, Display, Storage, etc. And all of these exist in these different compartments. So just a quick way to get there. We can also right click on the virtual machine, which gives us a whole bunch of options, and you'll see settings and clone is there. So if you click on clone, this allows you to make a copy of your virtual machine. So you can choose whether this is going to be an exact copy or whether you're going to maybe change the network adapter and change the network address. Remember that your network address needs to be unique for each network card. So if you clone it exactly, they're going to be the same, so you're going to have a conflict with your MAC address. More about that again later on when we do some networking. So it's just important just to note that if you right click on the machine, you can then go remove, which lets you also delete your created or cloned machine. You also have logs, so if you right click, you can go to log viewer, and there you can notice or have a look at any shenanigans that your VirtualBox might be getting up to. So if you have an issue where it's not booting properly or it's not starting or there's some sort of issue, you can actually go to your logs just to have a look and see what's going on with it. So it's basically like a hardware log for your computer. And you can then click on the little drop down list and you'll see you've got details, snapshots, logs, etc. Go to snapshots, and from here you're in a very useful place. With snapshots, what you can actually do is you can take images of states within your virtual machine. So in other words, if you're looking to make a change to your virtual machine, you can create a snapshot first, and if you don't like the change, you can then just roll it back using the snapshot. So if you click on snapshot there, you notice that you can create a name for the snapshot. In this instance, new machine, no Windows. And the description, well, you can make that anything you like, whatever works for you, and that creates a nice, useful little of being able to identify the snapshot because you can create multiple. You'll notice that it even gives you a date of when the snapshot was actually taken, so and a time as well. So that gives you a general idea of when that was made. So you can always roll that back accordingly should you need to. So with it enabled, if you click restore, what that does is that just restores a snapshot. We only have one snapshot here, so it's only going to restore the one. But we will have a little demonstration a little bit later on where we get into it with Windows, for example. So like you can install Windows and then restore it, and Windows is no longer there, for example. Of course, you can also delete the snapshot as well. We won't worry too much about that now, but if you delete the snapshot, it just removes the snapshot. Note you can grab the edges of the window and you can move them around, right? So you can actually move this console around to what is comfortable for you. So don't just work with it the way I'm doing it. As you play around and explore, what you'll find is you'll find your own little systems and ways of being able to perform various different tasks that might make things easier for you. Also notice that everything has a shortcut key. As you look through the menus, be mindful of that. These shortcut keys can also be used in order to be able to open different things. From a controller side, if I click on storage and then add hard disk, what I can do is I can create a new hard drive. Now note you've got two buttons. You've got add and create. If you click on add, that is just the option to add a hard drive. So you'll notice it's going to take you into your machine to go and look for a hard drive. We're not going to be adding a hard drive because we want to make one. So click on create. This will give you the options for VDI, VHD, and VMDK. We're just going to stay with the standard one, which is VDI, which is just a VirtualBox disk image, and we'll just click next. You can pre-allocate a size or leave it dynamically. We're going to leave it dynamic. And then of course you can choose a size and you can choose a name. So you'll see the location where it's going to save it into, and it's called Windows 11_1 at the moment. So what we can do is we can just change this, for example, to something like data or storage or stuff, whatever you want hard drive name to be, and we can allocate a new size for it should we wish to. Once we're done with that, we can click finished. Now you'll notice it's not attached. If you want to attach it, you can either click it and hit choose, or you can just double click on data. In this particular instance, what we're going to do is we're just going to double click it, and what it's going to do is it's automatically going to attach it. So now you can see that data.vdi is now attached. It's an 80 gig hard drive. At the moment it's only 2 meg, because obviously it's going to increase in size because it's dynamic as we load more stuff into it, and that is on SATA port number 2. So it'll even tell you what SATA port it's on, even though it's actually just a virtual drive. Once you're done with that, click OK, and you now have a hard drive. You'll notice you've got a change state there, and that is because you've got the hard drive there, right? So obviously what would happen is if you actually restore that, what would happen is it would actually remove the hard drive. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found this very, very useful. I hope you learned something new, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.